Hello, everyone. My name is Tosca Di Matteo, founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting, and I'm so excited that you're here with me today for Talk About It Tuesday. Today, we're going to be talking about authenticity with an amazing woman. Her name is Julie, and she's a co-founder of Vital Voice Training, and we're going to be talking about everything authenticity. And she is like a self-proclaimed introvert, so I'm really excited to get her perspective in a world in which it seems like the extroverts, the charisma, the all of that stuff gets all the attention and all the praise. And so yeah, I'm just super excited. Thank you for joining, Claire and Amy. So great to have you here. I've been doing this Talk About It Tuesday. I started it in August, so it's a series I'm really excited about because it's really done in the spirit of helping people to live their best life, to work on their own inner journey, so they can show up in the world the way that they feel really good about. And so I think we have our guest here, so we'll bring Julie on. Training. Here she comes. Hang in there. Hey!
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, it's morning where I am.
Well, yes. Yeah, it still feels like morning here on the East Coast, but welcome to the show.
So excited to talk to you.
Me too. And you know what? I was so afraid to say your last name, and I think it's Fogh. I think that's how you say it. Okay. But for some reason, my brain always says Fogh. So I'm like, let me just confirm. Okay.
It's because we've got Vincent van Gogh, so we're just used to seeing that extra H. It's just I include the H.
Well, I was kind of talking a little bit before you came on about what you do and what we're talking about in terms of authenticity. And first, I just want to say, I know this was originally going to be a conversation with the co-founders, you and your partner, Casey, but I'm actually really excited that it turned out the way that I get to have two different conversations. And then I get you to myself. I've been privy to the work that you do, privy to your passion around everything that you do and how you do it, and that you do it in a way that nobody else does. And I just thank you so much for making the time to have this conversation on this platform, because as I was saying, the reason why I do this is to provide a way for people to find their way into their inner work and to owning their superpowers and living their best life. And I know that concept is near and dear to your heart. So I'm thrilled that you're here.
I'm so excited. Yes, you are one of the people that inspires us to keep doing what we're doing. So it's a good match.
Yay. Well, then what I'd like to do is I'd like to just kind of hand it over to you for you to do your own introduction, to share about whatever you want about yourself, who you are, what you do, where you come from, and what brings you in this moment to talk about authenticity.
Sure. So I'm Julie Fogh. With that, in all my communication, all my world, all of the H's are silent. And I'm a co-founder of Vital Voice Training, which is a public speaking and communication coaching company that my business partner, Casey Erin Clark, and I founded in 2014 as actors, because we were seeing the world of speech coaching and voice coaching as really limited in how it was benefiting people. At the time that I was entering post 2010, when I graduated with my MFA in acting, and then did some extra voice training in a technique called Fitzmaurice work, which is really, really holistically, somatically body-based in terms of being able to explore physical habits and really get to understand sort of the intimacy we have between our thoughts and our breath and our communication. So I was coming from that world and into this world that I was seeing all of these kind of articles that everyone thought that they were an expert in women's voices, and most specifically why they were annoying. And you can just look at article after article. Oh, it's vocal fry. If only they wouldn't use vocal fry. If only they wouldn't use upspeak. So now I'm seeing all of these women who, in the communities as we switched from the artistic community to the business community, incredibly high achievers. Those were also in the artistic community, but in the business community, having less access to tools to understand why their bodies did the things their bodies did, and instead thinking it was some sort of deep character failing of why am I getting feedback that says I'm not powerful? Why am I, why can't I get ahead? Is it my fault? And I have a lot of feelings on what's being sold to women in general, but specifically for us, we were looking at that saying, no, that's not true. You are being told to accommodate your voice into a model that is not inherently better than any other model of what is supposed to sound good. Now, I do have a passion for women getting access to their full voices, but that doesn't mean you're stupid or dumb for using upspeak. For many, many reasons, I feel very strongly that women do not need to be fixed. So Casey and I met, fireworks started as we realized we shared this idea that women weren't broken, and how many other tools we had in our tool set to be able to teach women and men as well, but we started the company for women on how to access what we started calling your authentic voice. So that's the long, short version of how Vital Voice Training got started. And since then, we've had almost 7 years of people allowing us into their lives to get to see intimately the mechanisms of their communication and, be able to dive in and tweak utilizing the raw materials instead of this kind of annihilation of this is everything you are up until this point doesn't matter. All that matters is the way you communicate in this boardroom. And that's not it. We are, as human beings, we are a collective of moments, and each moment before influences the next moment. That's how it is, and that's how it should be. And there's tremendous strength and access to a lot more than we realize when we can bring more of ourselves to the table. So as far as authenticity goes, that's my passion. It's also my passion to look at the limitations where that's not possible, because sometimes it's not. So that's kind of how, Casey and I, at one point over the summer, she brought up this idea of what is authenticity? And as we tried to tease it apart, we realized we had no freaking clue if you were to ask us. Ultimately, what is authenticity? It's not just being yourself. It's not just speaking from the heart. It's this whole collection of how the raw materials of you meet the given circumstances of your life and how differently those show up.
Wow, I'm sorry. I just have to take a minute to breathe all that in. It's so powerful. And can I just say, I love that you could just own and say, we didn't know what it was. And this is something that was so at the core of what you believed, and that there's power in just owning that truth in that moment, even though I consider you guys experts in really understanding authenticity. Right. And I think, through the writing of your article, someday book, that your ability to understand the complexities and the nuance and was just incredible, first, full stop. But also that when you compile on the idea of especially voices who are really, really vilified, or I think of people of color. I think of people that have different gender identities and how they show up and what's authentic for them, and especially in the corporate environment, right, which is so far behind in just acceptance and inclusivity from where we need to be and should be as just a humanity. And I know you're really sensitive to that as well, that different communities have even more kind of whammies on top in terms of owning their authenticity. I guess I'll just stop there and see if there's anything that you wanted to build on that, because I know that it's something that you care deeply about.
Yeah, I think it's understanding, one of the original things we were looking at, in this idea of there is a model that people are telling you is right. Well, who's created that right? And I think we live in a deeply patriarchal and a deeply racist culture which is separate from the idea of, any individual actors. It's systemic. So what is right is very often modeled on what, there's a Black feminist writer named Audre Lorde who coined the term the mythical norm. And that's this imaginary norm to which all others must measure themselves against. And the further outside of that norm you are, the more code switching it has traditionally been required in order to fit in, because it's the way things are done, with very little questioning to why is that the way things have been done. And what that has resulted in is many people getting a very clear, often spoken, but sometimes not, but still just as clear message that not all of themselves are welcome in professional environments, in whatever environment it is. So in that way, that's how this enters the kind of that pie, because the ultimate goal of communication is what I think is what I'm thinking getting communicated to you, and are you understanding what I'm saying? That's it. But when you add, but you have to say it in a certain way, or you need to give these semiotic indicators that you're a certain way, that takes work and effort. And for the people who are within the mythical norm, it's easy because it is what you see every day. And if you're not, there's so much work required trying to intuit what is this that's expected of me in this environment. And if my success is going to be based on whether I meet it or not, I better get to cracking in decoding it.
Right. Oh, so that brings up this notion that I talk about all the time too, which is like, we're trying to change the game while we're still in the game. Right. Or like trying to not even play the fucking game anymore because like, just forget it, and so, but there's that reality, right? Of like, but we're not there. And, in the work that I do, right, as a coach, as a, career coach and consultant and things, right, I'm doing all this work about like owning your truth, owning your authentic self, and all of that juiciness there, and also having to ground in reality of like, what are you walking into, right? And so, yeah, like, what are your thoughts on that? Because there's still like this mega force that is, I don't know. I just kind of pictured like, like the Ice Age and these gigantic ice blocks, and they're still there, and yeah. So how do you deal with that when you're working with clients?
For us, it's really important we can talk about what we can control as an individual, and that's what we can work on in coaching. But what you can't control is, the environment that you're in necessarily. So this is when companies need to step in to make conscientious changes in how they are forming company cultures, in what they are asking for in the room. And companies do have a great deal of power in being able to do that. We're in a time right now that so many things that people thought of as given have been kind of blown up because, 2020, 2021. So we're getting an opportunity to see, oh, that's the way we always did it. Is that necessary going forward? And I think the more we can get both prongs, both institutions and individuals on board, which is why Casey and I have switched our work, not just to work with individuals, but to do in corporate trainings as well, of understanding communication across different kinds of styles and all of that stuff. But companies, we live in a capitalist society. Companies have the last word. Money has the last word in a lot of these decisions. And that's really important to consider as well, rather than taking on the entire onus of responsibility onto the individual.
Yeah. Yeah, you hear that, companies? Take ownership for your shit. That's what I'm saying. Oh, can we just get an amen on that? So, and actually, you bring up something I had jotted a few questions down. I don't always do that, but like there was some, and one of them was around like, you're called vital voice training, right? And you're also talking about like, right, being your authentic self and communicating in a way that is decoded the way that you intend it to be decoded. So in a way, I'm like, training feels like too small of a word. Like, what are you actually doing? Because I know like what you don't believe in is here's the rules of effective communication. Like I know you'll believe in that. So what is it really? If we're not training, then what are we doing?
Well, see, that's where you have to look at that training has different meanings in different environments as well. Because, if I go into a job, I worked in the hospitality industry for a long period of time, I go in to train. That's getting to know the job, that's shadowing people, all of those details that get me onto the floor. So there's training. We think about training as a specific, easily repeatable skill set. But in the artist's world and in the acting world, acting training is this whole palette of, it encompasses all of this nuance and deeply personal connections. So I guess partly training comes from this idea of actor training or artist training or, a trained dancer, these skills that are part physical expression and also kind of part how you think about and how you process information. And then training is also, it's possible. I think we sometimes come to this, it could never be me. I could never be an engaging public speaker. I could never be the one that speaks out. Well, yes, you freaking could. Let's talk about how. Let's talk about where that, not because you need to learn to speak up more, because again, going back to why people don't speak up has deeply real reasons, having to do with survival, safety, belonging, blah, blah. There's real reasons, but yes, you can. Let's figure out how. So if that answers your question of the roots of training.
I love it. Yeah, no, you just like schooled me on that. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. You're totally right. I'm totally narrow-minded in my, what does training mean? And what it sparks is you talked about the body, right? Like, so let's talk about that because I think in my world of coaching, right, that the notion of answers are in your body, like, is a complicated thing and not everybody really is open to it. But that, to me, there's so much to unlock there. So what does it mean when you're talking about body and authenticity and using your voice? Like, what is that all about?
Well, it's interesting that you said lock as a word when we're talking about bodies. And I'll give a little bit of backstory because I grew up in a family, my Fogh is a Danish last name. We've got some Scandinavian roots. Don't know if you've ever heard of like Scandinavian stoicism, but there's a little bit of a set jaw kind of, we are stoic people. We don't feel pain. We can go out into sub-zero temperatures and drink all night. And, all of that kind of stuff goes into some deep roots of where my family's from. So I grew up in a family that feelings weren't necessarily, felt and expressed. And not that they weren't welcome, but I didn't have a model for how feelings could be expressed in the body. And that led to a ton of physical tension for me that I started breaking down through my acting training. And I say that because sometimes I feel like a little bit of a wolf in the hen house when I'm just like, let's talk about bodies. And, I walked into my first acting class like a head on a stick, hi everyone, I'm Julie, so nice to meet you. But bodies, if we think about the fact that we don't just have a body, we are a body. And the head is a part of the body, but it's integrated with all of these systems. Even if you think about, in a metaphorical way, organ systems. My heart pumps blood that goes through my brain. I breathe in oxygen that goes into my blood, that goes into my brain, that goes through my body. We are integrated systems. So in fact, it takes more work to cut ourselves off from that than it does to actually experience it. And when we can accept that our bodies aren't a liability, they're an asset, we can start to recognize, I can think about things, but I've got 5 senses. I personally have 5 senses. I don't want to be ableist in the moment to call out all 5 senses. I will talk about the 5 senses I have. So I can see things, I can touch things, I can hear things, I can taste things. This is how I'm taking in my world. And whether I intellectually acknowledge it or not, those are all informing how I'm picking up on my environment. So when we're talking about your body has wisdom, yes, there's partly a great big esoteric concept, but our concept of bodies is a lot more visceral and it's not symbolic. It's real. I can touch my hand and feel myself touching my hand. So we're not looking at something abstract. We're saying, start to pay attention to the signals that your body is giving you. Because again, the more we can add vocabulary to things, the more we can figure out how they're coming into play, the more power we ultimately have, even if we're not taking the next step to change anything.
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know why I just want to ask this is like to contextualize this, right? Even more. Is there I don't know, either personally or through a client where like this notion of body, right? Just made a huge impact or breakthrough, like just to kind of, I'd love to just contextualize that more because I think, and I love the way that you entered into the conversation because for some people it's just really hard to be like, what, how are these things connected? So I just want to just like honor that, like it was just beautiful the way you talked about it. And but yeah, I'd love to hear more about what that does when we can listen to our body. What opens up?
I will try answering this in this way, and by all means ask more questions if I didn't get to your answer. When I think about it, so one of the things we talk about with clients is, how you sit in space. And Casey and I talk about with people, even in chairs, this idea of let your butt be big, which symbolizes the fact that often when we're disconnected from our bodies, we end up in these, what I call subway contractions. And those are, like, if you imagine riding the subway and you're next to somebody who is really spreading out and you do that little kind of like, I don't want to touch you, and I don't want to touch you, or middle seat phenomenon that we have. When we're disconnected from our bodies, we're getting off planes or out of situations with kind of this, I don't notice anymore that I'm tense. Tying this back to how we sit in furniture, if your whole day is sort of spent not being aware of your body, and now I'm sitting and I'm on a meeting like this, well, listen to what that just did to my voice, because it inherently, by collapsing my lungs and collapsing my vocal cord and tweaking, like all of these things, has a real physical impact on my voice and how I'm communicating, on my breath, all of those organ systems that are coming through. So in a real way, that's one avenue that getting connected with our bodies can help us with something as fundamental as gravitas.
Yeah. So, I'm curious, what is it, like, if you could shout from the rooftops, like, what is the one thing that you wish people, would start doing, today, as it relates to this topic of authenticity? Like, what do you just, want the world to, what do you want them to know?
There's so much. I think really when it comes to authenticity, if we're going to go the avenue that authenticity can mean speaking your truth or something like that, and there are elements of that, I want people to understand what that truth is. People talk about polish. What am I polishing? What am I, understand how many multitudes you contain, and how much of what you think is just you is in fact a habit to a particular environment. That's really what it is. Let's get to know this extensive amount of raw materials you have access to, and then how to work with it. So I think that would be, all of the models Casey and I have been working with have an inherent motion and interaction to them. And that was something that we were beating ourselves up well, beating our heads against the wall, there's a lot of beating involved until we realized, oh, this is dependent on something else. We need to create models with movement in them. And that's kind of what I want people to think about authenticity as, is it's dynamic and it's you plus your environment. And that's kind of what Casey and I were playing with the definition of functional authenticity. You plus your given circumstances is the authenticity of that moment.
Yeah. And what I heard, by the way, for the people that are on, you know, feel free to pop a question in. By all means, we have like liquid gold with Julie being here today. And it makes me, you know, what you said, the way that I interpret it is like question what you think you're being asked to do and what you think you're trying to change or what have you. Because there's so much conditioning that we have to decondition, that we have to question what are our motivations, you know? I don't know if that's kind of how you meant it.
It's all of it. It's Casey and I have talked about that our gut has tremendous wisdom in it, but it also contains our bias. So going in and unpacking that, how do you do that? I don't think some of this is self-reflection, and some of this has to be just by necessity, other reflection to it, because that's really how we form our concept of who we are as people, is through how we're reflected back to us by the people surrounding us. So I have totally lost my train of thought where I was going with that, but
no, it makes sense. Well, yeah, because we were talking about like questioning, like not just like opening our inner world, but also the external. And it just, you know, it just made me think of like this idea of, yeah, if you're in some, you know, office, whatever, corporate environment, and you're being given some feedback about how you're showing up, you know, I think that our natural response to that is to kind of, you know, lean back, right? And be like, oh crap, right? People that are in positions of power, we tend to feel like, oh, we have to take this in, as opposed to what if our first reaction to that kind of feedback was, well, what is it, you know, is asking a curious question about like, what is it about how I showed up in the meeting today that made you uncomfortable? Even if they didn't say they were uncomfortable, but to just be like, just break open the door and really get underneath it and say like, is this really is this real? Like, or is, you know, by me changing, is it making you more comfortable? Or by me adjusting, is that making me a more effective communicator? And really just like getting underneath that. And I think, speaking of like using your voice, I think sometimes answering with questions can be way more powerful than we give it credit for.
I think that involves, when we talk about feedback, we often talk about considering the source of your feedback, because what we observe over and over with people getting feedback is somebody has an impression and then they put words to it to try and make it sound like it's not just what they prefer. The challenge that I've seen over the years is very few people are aware enough about themselves to actually have a conversation like the one you describe. They're first, oh, no, that's not automatically, that's not what happened, it's you. So, you know, that's kind of where I say companies also have a responsibility. And this is where I think bringing in diversity and inclusion experts, hiring bias trainers, anti-bias trainers to come in is a really critical step for this to have longevity. Because again, if people aren't aware that that's what they're doing in a useful way, like we can have awarenesses of things that aren't yet useful, then even your efforts to ask a direct question might land on deaf ears, you know?
That's fair. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of part of that overtaking individual responsibility. But that being said, not all feedback is created equal.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. I know feedback is like a whole nother friggin' session for sure. That's like a whole nother quagmire. So I'm thinking about, this idea of what we're told about speaking up more. And I think especially for people that consider that process more internally, right? That talking things out loud isn't their first go-to. And I think that those people, I hate to even use the label introvert, but like, whatever. But people that are outside of like the dominant culture, let me just put it that way, right? In wherever they are, whatever that dominant culture is. I think that it can be so easy to be hard on yourself, right? Or to, to want to force yourself to be another way in order to, right? Like fit in or whatever that is. And I'm just curious about, I know we've talked about how you're like a self-proclaimed introvert, and like, I'm just curious about, like your journey in owning that beautiful way that you show up and powerful way that you show up, and what that might, how that might serve people that are watching now or later that may identify with being kind of outside that dominant culture way of being.
Part of the dominant culture is that in the United States, there is a favoritism for extroverts. But when it comes to things like, speaking up, this is where we take it back to our core values. So if I'm just a natural introvert and also was raised in a family where just saying something to say something is kind of the worst thing you can do, just not like that's dramatic, but that is, you don't just say something just to say something. Think about it, consider your words. That's a deeply held belief. So if I'm in a situation where suddenly my work is saying, you need to speak up more, I have to really examine what's the challenge there. The challenge is it's fundamentally not okay for me to just say something to say something. That's going to feel hollow. Maybe I can do it a little bit, but it's not sustainable. But is that my only option? No. What I can do is say, okay, well, what do I have to contribute as an introvert? And start to use those observation skills and those being able to integrate information. So say I'm looking at a bunch of people starting to play those who are loudest win. Instead of jumping in, I can jump in and say, hey, I'm hearing a lot of ideas thrown at us. What I'm seeing this is, and be able to do my thing without just speaking to speak. Or even I'm hearing a lot of ideas. I'm looking for something specifically related to X. Asking a question and you seeing what's happening in front of you and working with that also is a part of how introverts can speak up while utilizing the fact that I need to take a moment to consider. It's never about, I wish I could think faster. It can't be. It's about, how do I harness the benefits of my taking a moment to consider, do I have a notepad with me to jot down my thoughts so I don't forget them? What's my style of speaking up? What's the ultimate contribution that ties into my core values?
Ooh, yeah. Oh, Amy says, thanks for the empowering message. She has to run and teach a class. She's a professor.
Thanks for coming in.
I love her handle, Preppy Rebellion. It just incites all kinds of questions that I have. But yeah, thanks for joining. Yeah, so I'm curious if you have or if you had, or even if you have now, role models for, I guess the word power comes up, right? For people who own their power and just use it in a way that honors them. I don't know, just curious.
Yeah, I think in general, Michelle Obama is just my gold standard of somebody that moves through the world, honoring who they are, speaking up for what they believe in, and doing it in a way that still contains so much kindness and compassion. That's a really big one for me. I have the people that I look at to model just that I enjoy watching, like B. Arthur from Golden Girls, and in a lot, a generation of, I guess, women comedians that perhaps I identify somehow with them as they grew up in an environment that they didn't necessarily fit in, but found their own unique sense of humor anyway. So those are two. I tend to identify a lot with fictional characters. This is part of being like a really imaginative child. If I'm reading a book or watching a TV show, I get very personally attached. So whether somebody's real or fictional, they both can still have tremendous power for me.
Yeah, no, I love that. That makes sense. Because I think, you know, there's this idea, right, of if you can see it, right, that helps in the empowerment, of, oh, they can do it that way. That feels better to me. I can do it that way,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And also, I think that we just don't have enough examples out there, right, for everybody to find themselves in seeing things the way that they could be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to be imaginative. Like, and it just makes me think, I'm like, oh man, yeah, like I could have clients like create their own like superheroes and like, how do they act? What do they do? Because, right, like part of it is like, is like, what are we trying to achieve? Uh, how do we define success? What do we want ourselves to look like in the mirror
Yes.
when we're doing this work?
Yes. That's a step I think we often forget to take when we immediately jump to how can I fit into what people are telling me is the right way to do things. Exactly, nail on the head.
Yeah, it's like, what is success for me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it actually may not align with what it looks like for somebody else, but you can still sleep at night because, you did it your way. Channel Frank Sinatra. But yeah, what's up? What are some of the things that have been most useful for you in your journey of, yeah, like just, I don't know, I guess like loving and honoring yourself?
Oh, there's some that are prettier than others in when we phrase it like that. Just one of the journeys of going through acting school, the technique I studied was called the Meisner technique, and it's very observation based and it's very action based. So a lot of it is imagination work surrounding, an activity that is difficult to do, that you have a very deeply personal reason for doing. And that reason comes out of your imagination. And I spent my first, 5 years of studying acting training trying to figure out what's going to be a good activity that the teacher will want to see. And when I finally realized, oh, it's what's hard for me and what's meaningful to me, that's when I just had this light bulb moment of everything. I talk about this with my students sometimes, that my job as a teacher is to take you out into the forest and let you find your own way back. Then that's going to be your process. This is part of, I think, owning that what's inside, or sometimes I talk about it in terms of the big ball of crazy, which is that kind of innermost, all of the swirling. Is this normal? Is this not? I feel passionately about this. This is sort of weird about me. I get mad at these things. But it's not fully like processed and digested and ready for prime time. And I feel like that surrounds the most intimate, delicate, most valuable parts of ourselves. So for me, getting to know a little bit more the landscape of the big ball of crazy, which isn't, spoiler alert, crazy at all. I guess, there's other disciplines have, shadow side work or whatever. Without labeling good or bad, all your materials are good materials. They're all workable materials. So that's kind of the piece I had to make. They aren't necessarily the materials, if I had put down my dream list, I would have wanted, but that's so irrelevant to what it is that I actually have access to.
Oh my God. I love that. And I kind of just want to pause and let that land for people, because it's such a powerful concept that you're talking about, of the way that I'm, seeing it is, yeah, like all the parts of ourselves, the parts that we love, the parts that we hate, the parts that we still feel shame around, the parts that make us feel guilty, and just integrating and loving all of it is and dude, that process clearly it's the journey is not easy, right? It's not like one day you wake up and you're like, I'm just gonna love all of me, and like
no, not at all. And especially because we change through our lives. So sometimes you get completely used to a certain landscape that you have internally, and then you go through like a life cycle change, and suddenly even your internal landscape has shifted. So that the adaptability is really the skill, not the adaptability to a specific way of being.
Yeah. It makes me think of like, well, part of, I think, my journey has been like being able to see all these parts of me as like knobs, right? And that if I, in order to achieve what I want to achieve, meaning whatever, successfully like influence somebody or whatever that is, that if I turn down a part of myself, it doesn't mean I'm not being authentic. It means I'm being adaptable, right? It means I can honor what's true for me, and I can see what's needed in the room. And that can still be authentic. And I think especially for people young, just kind of figuring out who they are, right? Is realizing you're not a sellout. If you're turning it down in that environment, or you're turning it up in that environment. And that, yeah, it's like the music that we play is going to look different based on what's needed in the moment.
Which, yes, it goes back to what I was saying about we contain multitudes. So this idea that there's a fixed way I'm authentic and that self belongs in all environments defies what I was saying. It's yourself plus your given circumstances.
Right.
And again, separating this adaptability from this idea of requiring code switching and these large identity shifts. This is where this stuff gets all super, super nuanced, because yes, we are different under different given circumstances. And yes, some given circumstances actually shouldn't be that way. So we're working with the duality there of both the adaptability and, trying to do the systemic change as well.
Right. And I think what that brings up for me is this, like, I feel like there's real need right now for courage and for breaking through the fear and for taking risks. Like in these environments, right, which we know are there, we're trying to change and shift. And I'm curious, I don't know, like this idea of, right, courage to use your voice, your courage to call things out, of blasting through the fear. Like, I don't know, I guess it's just a very big open-ended question on what that is for you, and like how that, like, because to me that's our growth, right? Is getting out of our comfort zone. We're not making ourselves wrong by being in our comfort zone, but more like, what else do I want to be possible by stepping outside of it? And there may be real consequences. And I don't know, balancing all that, I don't know what I'm asking, but I guess I don't know.
I've got an answer.
Okay, great.
It's this idea of discomfort versus pain. And when you're talking about courage, I sometimes don't even know what courage is supposed to mean. Because when I've done things that have been deemed courageous, I sure as shit didn't feel courageous when I was doing them. So, maybe it's that it's a verb, not a state of being. But that we have, get back to what I was saying at the beginning. Yes, discomfort and pain. Discomfort is something we just as humans, because of who we are and how we're wired towards survival, avoid. But discomfort is actually pretty fertile territory. It's pain that we're looking to make sure that we're not deep diving into. Discomfort, and this is something, I read a book about awkwardness a while back, Cringeworthy, by a writer named Melissa Dahl, who basically described awkwardness as the discomfort of seeing yourself reflected back to yourself in a mirror you don't recognize. So when I read that, I'm just like, oh, God, discomfort is just discomfort. Oh, we got to get used to discomfort, but not pain. I don't think we need to get used to pain. And I wonder if we can start to phrase discomfort as just that's uncomfortable, if we sort of take away the idea that there needs to be a huge courage to engage in it. Not that I think courage is an extraordinarily, a wonderful concept, but I think there are some things that might just be, that the courage might be a byproduct instead of a, maybe the motivator.
Yeah. I mean, that the word courage is absolutely interesting. And it also makes me think of what you were saying about discomfort, right? Is that it's like, I've been reading a book and it's like this idea of like normalizing, right? Discomfort. Because, things are constantly changing. And so if we just keep expecting that we're not going to get like curveballs thrown every day, then like we're not living in reality.
Right. Like comfort and stasis get confused.
Right. Right. And also I think that, I don't know, I think I take a page of like courage from, I think how Brene Brown I think this is her definition, but it's something like, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Or feeling the discomfort and making the choice that is uncomfortable anyway. And that, I think, my perspective is that when you own all these parts of you and you own your truth, meaning your values, meaning how you show up in the world, like all of the above, to me, it becomes easier to choose courage more often.
Yes, because you know what you're being courageous for. You know what you're standing up for. That's kind of what I mean. Courage is the willingness to live in your integrity.
Yes. I love that. What a great. It just makes me think of MLK Day being yesterday, right? And all the things that conjures up. And I think that being authentic is an act of rebellion. It is the resistance right now, And so I don't know, like in the work that I do, I always say that like we have to be the change, that we have to start with ourselves. Like it's like, yeah, we can point fingers all day long, but at the end of the day, what we can really impact is ourselves. What we can,
That's Obama talked about that in his. I got to be in Grant Park the night Obama won the election in 2008.
Oh wow!
And that was part of his speech that gave me chills, and I think is just deeply influenced. It's going back to JFK. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. This personal accountability and personal responsibility. Call me right now as we're trying.
I was like, wait, you went out of wait. Yeah, we didn't hear you for a few.
Yeah. My phone was ringing for just a second. Just saying that individual responsibility, that is empowerment, and again, we're talking about spectrums of things, because with a lot of our women clients, the individual responsibility actually takes on what should be group responsibility. So it's exactly right sized for what responsibility is supposed to be. Some people need to take more. Some people need to take less, or be more specific about what responsibility they're taking. Because again, if you work with the things you can control and accept there are things you can't, well, now you've just metered your energy down to exactly what you have power over, which is a much, much better use of your energy. Sort of like when I talk about strengths and weaknesses. Your weaknesses are infinite, but your strengths are finite. So like, it's a better ROI to invest in your strengths, So it's along those lines, the dance of personal accountability versus, taking blame for somebody else's shit.
Oh my God. I love that you talked about this, because there was something I just felt like I wanted to say around this idea of like, I think that we often like don't like invest in ourselves, that we say that whether it's scarcity mindset or whatever it is, it's like the first thing that we're going to even take off the table of considering is like, is work to invest in myself. And it's just, it's tough because it's like, if you really want to make a change, like that's the first place. Like if you really want your life to be different, if you want the world to be different, like that's going to be the place where you're going to get the highest ROI, like you said. Like it's not going to be in donate. I mean, like please donate to good causes, but like, you know what I mean? Like the real change is in how are you showing up in a way that most honors you in that moment and who you want to be. And that is the real change, I think. Total soapbox moment. I'm sorry, but like but it's January too, right? It's January. Budgets are fresh, and like our intentions are fresh. Our goals, so many of us, right? Like we revisiting like intention and all that. Goal and resolution is like too big for me, but like just intention, and like, and actually to that point, like I had set this intention. My intention of this call with you was to inspire people to love themselves just a little bit more as a result of this conversation. And sometimes I think to do that work of loving ourselves more, we just need support along the way. Like sometimes it's hard to just do it yourself and see your strengths yourself, right? Because you're so intimate with who you are, you don't even see that sometimes like the best parts of you are right there. You don't even like own it.
Well, and then that kind of takes me to what I wanted to say, which is one of the best things Casey and I did for ourselves and our business in 2020 was invest in you for exactly those reasons, because that. I don't actually believe people are capable of seeing everything for themselves, what they're good at and impact. Like you need an external eye, but an eye with what you have, this incredible level of expertise and, hard skills combined with a really deep and unique understanding of the subtle things that go into making changes and improvements and, getting to really break things apart in a way that's overlaps a lot with how Casey and I look at the human voice. So that was one of our first investments in ourselves, because as women entrepreneurs, the number one thing we don't do is invest in ourselves. And we just have been like blinking our eyes with the holy shit. that just changed our lives to do that. So getting, taking the step that you're worth the investment in, and then finding people to really trust and hold your, I was going to say hold your hand, but that's not what I meant. I meant hold space with you.
That will take you into the forest so that you can find your way back.
Yes. Yeah, take you into the forest, and they're not going to let you like drown in some quicksand or get attacked by an ROUS or something like that. They're going to be like in the trees above, but they're going to let you figure out, by little trial and error, what works for you. Women, invest in yourselves. Do this. It's life-changing, and your power just grows when you start inviting other people on your team with you.
Ooh, I love that. And thank you. I receive that. I really do. I appreciate you. And and I'm just a couple things, as we kind of close out. Number one, like, is there anything that we didn't cover that you're like, I really want to talk about this? And number two is, just letting people know where they can learn more and find out more about what you and, Vital Voice Training does. And like what feels right.
It's always important for me to leave a conversation reminding people you are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. These ideas we have about asking for help and weakness are a narrative that is toxic, and it's a bunch of bullshit, and it's not true. We are a collective society. We are meant to work with each other. We are meant to have social support with what we're going through. That is not something that makes you weak. So I within anything we do, whether it's voice work, whether it's business coaching, recognizing that these things are a partnership is, to me, deeply critical for allowing your expanse of your reach and your expanse of what skill sets are possible to get out into the world. So that's just really important to say you're not broken and asking for help doesn't mean you were. It's the smart thing to do. And if you're looking for help with public speaking or communication or how you're showing up or the energy you show up with, Casey and I are here to help with that. I'm in San Francisco, Casey's in New York, so we've got this bi-coastal thing going on. We're doing everything over Zoom, and you can find us at vitalvoicetraining.com. And you can book a 15-minute free consultation if you want to talk about your issues and how we might be able to help. We also have, if you join our mailing list, a little mini communications core values packet that we can send you to help you start to analyze, what is it that I'm coming from? And we have the authenticity paper as well. If you are interested in diving into the authenticity work as deeply as Casey and I did, and that's vitalvoicetraining.com/authenticity. I think that's correct. If it's not, just send us an email and we'll make sure you get it.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. I love that message, right? Like, and I kind of want to add, like, you're not broken and you're not wrong.
Yes.
Yes. Like, oh my God, that whole nother conversation on you're not wrong. Anyway, but thank you. That's so beautiful. And this whole conversation it's just been a delight and an honor. And I just believe so much in the work that you guys are doing, because it's the deeper work, right? We talk about it. It's not the iceberg. It's not the like voice, volume, tone. It's all the shit underneath about like how you're showing up in the world, and which is just, that's work that I completely trust you guys with, and I would entrust with anybody. So for anybody listening, if this is calling to you, you can't go wrong, and you aren't wrong.
I love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And this will be posted right after, and I look forward to us continuing to work together in the many ways that we do.
Awesome. Thank you, Tosca.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
And ciao for now.
Ciao.